Hi, everybody, and welcome. Thanks so much for making the time today for yourself to join us. Now, I definitely don't want to make you guys fall asleep now. My intention is to give you things that you can fall asleep later and have a fantastic sleep. But I am going to make you do a little bit of work. So I know that some of you will have already spent the whole of this morning sitting, and I can see that some of you are already sitting. So I'll invite you to put some games and books under your laptop if you want, and to stand up and move around a bit. But before we start, I definitely want to make sure that you're with me and that you have energy. So we're all going to take a few big deep breaths and use our hands, okay? So I can see you, no cheating and watching, okay? So are you ready? Big breath in, hands over the head, and let it out. And again, up, and let it out. And just wiggle your shoulders about a bit for me, okay? And do this with your head, because I know some of you are all creaky from being like this. Great. Now, I know that many of you will have heard different things about sleep. You'll already have a few things that you might be doing and a few things that you've heard. So I'm going to do my best to reframe everything so that you're not going to be bored or hearing things again. So we're going to look at it in a slightly different way. So I want you to get your hands for me like this and to open them out. Now, what I want you to think about is that you have a very delicate glass bowl hovering just above your hands, okay? It's a very delicate glass bowl. And I want you, this is your sleep, okay? And I want you to think about it the way they thought about the ring in the Lord of the Rings. Like, this is my precious, okay? This is your precious sleep. And if you wanted to transport this glass ball anywhere, you would have protective bubble wrap around it. You would probably put it into a special box with polystyrene. You would make sure to handle it very carefully. And what we're going to be looking at is our sleep. What are the things that we can protect it with on either end of the day? So before you go to sleep and after you wake up in the morning. And the strategies we're talking about are the things that protect your sleep for yourself and that enhance your sleep. And to make it just a little different, we're just going to look at three areas, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to remember these. The first is light, the second is food and drink, and the third is altered states of consciousness. Okay? So when it comes to the first element of light, and if we're thinking of our little bowl here, what we want to do in the morning, okay, we want an abundance of light in the morning, and we want an absence of light before we go to bed. Okay? So what happens in the morning time when we get outside? Now, today is beautiful in Cork, absolutely gorgeous. The sun is shining, it's really bright, but we're heading into winter. And it's not going to be like that every morning. I'm going to tell you something that you will probably be surprised by. You know, those mornings when we wake up and it feels like there's just a sliver of sunlight and it actually feels quite gray and gloomy outside. Believe it or not, that will be perceived by your brain as light. Light is measured in something called lux. And even when it looks gloomy outside, our brains don't see it as gloomy. Our brain is able to pick up on the lux in natural light. And what happens is that it resets our internal circadian clock. Now, it's really important to reset it every day. It basically ensures that we function completely optimally. And the reason why it needs to be reset is that for some bizarre reason, it's not a 24-hour clock. It's approximately 24 hours and 15 minutes. And if it doesn't get reset every day, you'll feel a little off, you'll feel a little bit groggy. Now, the best way to get this is to go outside, right? You go outside in the morning, just say to yourself, wrap up well if you need to, but you're just going to expose yourself for 10 to 20 minutes of this natural sunlight. Now, I'm expecting a few of my pals from Dubai to be listening in on this today. So when they get up in the morning, they're hit with sunshine. The advice to you is resist putting on your sunglasses. The light in the morning needs to get to that part of our brain to reset our clock. The added benefit is that you're getting movement in. Our bodies need us to move sufficiently during the day so that we can get sleep later on, right? You've probably noticed this before. If you've had a really lazy pajama day and you just mooched around all day, you've watched lots of episodes on Netflix, you haven't really moved terribly much, you don't really feel terribly sleepy that night. Our bodies need to move in order to be able to get great sleep later. Now, we're going to be focusing on getting an abundance of light in the morning. Also, work near a window if you can. Get as much light into your body as you possibly can. Going for a walk at lunchtime, a terrific way to get light in. So it's kind of easy to get the abundance of light that we need in the morning to protect our sleep, but it's the absence of light in the evening. This is the tricky bit. And if you think you might have an addiction to either Netflix or your phone, make sure to find out about the digital detox workshop next month. But what the reason why we need, and I'm sure many of you have heard this term now, you've heard about blue light. So what happens is when we look outside, we just see light as light. But of course, it's a spectrum and it contains all of the colors. Now, our brains are incredibly sensitive to the blue light. So in the morning time, it's amazing. It picks up on the blue light, or melatonin, which is our sleepy hormone, that gets dispersed by the blue light, and our cortisol naturally raises. Cortisol is a stress hormone, but sometimes it's good. We'll get onto that later. So the problem is when it's the opposite end of the day, and it's the end of the day, you're getting sleepy. This is when you need to be preparing for bed. If we expose our brains to blue light, and the blue light comes from either the overhead light, the TVs, the computers, or actual phones, we are going to be exposing our brain to all of that blue light, and it's really, really confusing. Think about it. Everything about you is getting ready to go to sleep. Then all of a sudden, the blue light comes in and says, wakey, wakey, it's daytime. When we're exposed to that, the melatonin can't rise. So we're supposed to be getting flooded with melatonin in the early evening because it helps us sleep. And as the melatonin rises, most of our hormones are like seesaws. So when the melatonin rises, cortisol goes down. In the morning, the opposite happens. The cortisol comes up and the melatonin goes down. It's incredibly confusing for our bodies. We're gearing towards sleep this way, and yet the message we're giving in is it's time to wake up, it's time to do other functions. Here's the light, okay? So what we want to do is to make sure that we're protecting our sleep by excluding the blue light in the evening. Now, an hour would be the basic minimum. 90 minutes is better, and more time again is even better again. Now, I know that many of you are aware of the fact that you can change the light setting on your phones, and you can get something called Get Flux. And I even have I have blue light blocking glasses, light ones and quite heavy ones. I would still say to aim to be off all of your devices and screens an hour to 90 minutes beforehand, because we'll get to it later, but everything that you're absorbing is also going to have an effect on your sleep. So the aim is to actually make sure that we're off everything like that 60 minutes to 90 minutes beforehand, to give ourselves just the optimal amount of time to get ready, to have that melatonin. And of course, we don't want cortisol near to our time of night. Now, the second thing we want to focus on is the food and drink. So have you ever turned up somewhere and it's kind of late, but you say to the chef anyway, is there any chance of getting something to eat? Is there anything that's still there that we can have? If you're an important enough person, the chef would just go, chuck back on his apron and prepare you something. But effectively, the kitchen is closed. So when it comes to food and drink, when we're thinking of the nighttime, right? If you're aware of the fact that our bodies are constantly, constantly working and making sure that we are the very best that we can be. So it means that even though we go to sleep and we think nothing's happening, there's an incredible amount happening at night. And it's mostly to do with repairing cells, increasing our muscle mass, creating hormones to help us to be happier, to be healthier, to make better choices with what we eat. And it's also for consolidating memories and for cleaning out any debris from our brains. The cleaning out of debris is really, really important. If it doesn't happen, later on, this presents itself as things like dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. So it's really important that our brains are able to do what they want to do at night. One thing that stops the brain doing what it wants to do at night is when it's having to deal with the effects of food and drink because we ate or drank something too late. So sometimes this can be a little tricky to implement. And the best way to do it, the easiest way to do it is just to go backwards, sort of 15 minutes, half an hour at a time. Like if you're used to having a small snack, maybe, half an hour before you go to bed, just work backwards to break yourself. You can go cold turkey. Cold turkey is not easy for any of us. So just work your way backwards. So what you're aiming for to protect the sleep, think about it. You've got the protection on both sides. You want about a 3-hour period where you're not eating or drinking anything. The caveat is you can have water and you can have a herbal tea. A herbal tea isn't going to affect any of the functions. But what happens is as soon as you start to take in anything with a calorific value, right? The calories are heat and energy. Immediately, your liver needs to start certain processes. Your blood sugars go up. Your stomach works on digestion. There's a part of the factory, it's going on, it's awake, it's working for approximately 3 hours. So we want all of that function to be gone before we go to bed so that none of the resources, none of the workers are doing anything at all with the digestive functions. All our resources are going to the things that are really important, right? To ensure that we are the best us the following day. Now, the other side of the day, what tends to happen is for many, many people, you can put your hands up, you can put it in the comments in the chat. Many, many people, the first thing they think of going for in the morning, it's almost synonymous with the morning, is a cup of coffee. And there's this whole sort of thing of don't even talk to me before I've had my cup of coffee in the morning. Now, you'll remember I mentioned that the melatonin goes down and the cortisol goes up in the mornings. Cortisol is your natural caffeine. Cortisol is what gives you that zip and that ability to get things done in the morning. If you can, hold off a little bit before having the coffee, because the cortisol will do all that for you first thing. And then later on, you can actually have caffeine to, just to give you the buzz that caffeine gives you. Now, where we need to be careful with coffee is that it has a half-life. Caffeine in coffee has a half-life of approximately 8 hours. So if you want to be going off to sleep at 10 o'clock, say, you'll still have half of the caffeine in your system if your last cup of coffee was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Where it becomes problematic is that a lot of people will actually need a coffee at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, just to get them through. They think they need it to get them through, to get them over a slump. But what happens is that this caffeine is still coursing through our veins in the nighttime and causing us to have difficulties falling asleep or staying asleep. So if you've got, at any stage you have questions, pop them in the chat and we'll deal with them afterwards. But caffeine is definitely something that you want to make sure there's an absence of. It doesn't appear in the 3 hours before sleep. This definitely is something that you'd want to stop 8, 10 hours before sleep. So really think of coffee as a morning drink as opposed to at any other time of the day. The morning time, I would definitely suggest And I noticed Christine and I were chatting earlier, and both of us had our glasses of water before we joined all of you. Make sure that you have water with you. Our brains are incredibly active at night. They are going to get dehydrated. So make sure in the morning that one of the things that you do take in terms of food is, your glass of water. Of course, it's great. I've apple cider vinegar in mine. Hot lemon is great. It starts to gently wake up your stomach. But the other thing regarding food and drink, it benefits not only your sleep, but it benefits everything else that you're doing during the day. So we know we have a circadian clock, but now we also know that all of our organs have their own circadian clock. So our bodies get used to us doing certain things at certain times, and our organs will do certain activities at certain times as well. What's the best thing for our health and for our sleep is consistency. You can choose the times yourself, but consistency. So the easiest thing to do is to work backwards. If you're going to sleep, you're aiming to get to sleep for 10. So then you're going to be having your last food and drink is going to be over by 7 o'clock, and then just work backwards. If you can have what's called a time restricted eating window of anywhere between 8, 10, and 12 hours, that's best for your body. It means that everything is working in according to its own circadian rhythm, right? And you'll, again, if you find that you've been used to eating over a much larger period, right? Maybe you're eating over, 7 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. Start coming towards each other so that you reduce them, and you'll start noticing a lot of knock-on benefits with your health. Now, the third thing I was talking about is altered states. And I'll let you know what I mean by that. So sleep has always been important, but I think up until this year, I think a lot of us took a lot of things about our health for granted. A lot of us thought we had a lot more time than we had, and possibly we were less aware of the importance of taking care of ourselves. But also right now, just because of the times we're living in, something that's very heightened is more attacks on our mental health, more anxiety, more fear, more stress. And this is where the third component really, really comes into its own, not only to make your sleep dramatically better, but also to make all the other areas of your life better. So when it comes to things like anxiety and fear and stress, there are two things that are sort of the main focuses. One is that your breathing can become very shallow, and you'll notice that you seem to be, have your shoulders up and your breathing is more shallow. And certainly when we're in stress, whether we're aware of it or not, on the inside, the state that we're in, you'll know it as the fight or flight, and its opposite is the rest and digest, or the rest and play. There's lots of different words used, but essentially the scientific term for them is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system. So when we're in the sympathetic system, which is, or when we're in the sympathetic state, which is the stressed state, our hearts are beating faster, our temperature is up. We're less able to think clearly because our resources are going to everything that'll make us be able to run away from the tigers. Except that there are no tigers. The tigers in this situation are fears about contracting COVID, or fears about what will happen to our loved ones, or just simply irritation and disappointment and not being able to hug people or to go where we want to go and enjoy what we want to enjoy. All of those things keep us in the stressed state, the sympathetic state. The other thing when you have worries and fears is that it's a huge component in insomnia, into waking up and not being able to get back to sleep, into having problems falling asleep. So that's a great deal of mental activities in our brain. So we have the two things where we have a lot of activity in our brain that we simply can't quietly. And there's a lot of activity in our body where cortisol is racing around the place and our vitals aren't great. If you think about it, when there's too much cortisol and our body's getting ready for us to run away to defend ourselves, the body is concentrating on that. The body is not concentrating on rest, on repair, on creating other hormones, right? It's racing, it's out there. So it's really important that we employ strategies that help our bodies to be as calm as possible, that help our brains to be as calm as possible. So it could be that some of you are using some of these already. Please let me know in the chat. And it could be that you've heard of some of these, or it could be, and this is absolutely fine to admit, it could be that you are like this, like a child and saying, it's all baloney. That is also perfectly fine. But what my advice is, meditation, journaling, breathing techniques, and reading things that inspire you. And I'll tell you why. So you've seen it. You've seen the rise of gratitude journals. You've seen the rise of so many different forms of meditation. You've possibly heard about journaling practices. So this is what happens to our bodies and brains when we start doing these things. So it's very easy to Google. It's been scientifically proven that when people focus on their breath, and it can be incredibly easy to do that, or when people engage in meditation, their breathing is altered and their mental state is altered. So you're probably aware of brain waves and the different states that we go into in sleep, from the alpha, the beta, the delta. When you focus on your breathing, you are going into and closer to those delta states, which is the relaxed state. This is when you're in the parasympathetic. So you're the very opposite of the stress state with cortisol. So you can get yourself from a stress state to a restful state simply by, you can put your hands on your belly, you can breathe in for 4 and out for 4. You can do what's called a box breath. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. Or you can do alternate breathing, where you might breathe in for 5, hold for 4, and out for 7. But any of these things, and here's the thing that's amazing, you actually only need to do this for a few rounds, even 1 minute, 60 seconds before you go to sleep. And again, you can do it in the morning. That's all it will take to physiologically alter your state, which is an incredible tool. Imagine you do this and you're stopping the cortisol from flowing. So you're stopping the negative effects of cortisol in your entire body. Now with meditation, there's never been a better time to get into it because there are so many apps and there are so many free apps. One in particular that I recommend to people because you have so many choices. You have people that you can listen to until you find voices that you like, methods that you like, music that you like, and that's Insight Timer, INSIGHT Timer. I recommend to everyone having a look at it. Many of you will have heard and tried Calm, Headspace, Deepak Chopra, all of these things. There's so many resources that you can find. So it can be a very good way to just dip your feet into meditating before you commit to a group or anything like that. You don't even have to tell people you're doing it. It's a great way just to get started. Now, the thing with journaling is that it gives you an opportunity to take everything that's bothering you and get it out of your head. Now, it could be really simple. It could be what's called a brain dump. So you might have something stressful that you're working on for work, or there's something coming up, or you're just general worries. You are generally worried about people you love and what's going on. So what you do is you just get any piece of paper and you just write down what's worrying you. And at any stage then when you're lying down in bed, getting ready for sleep, If you feel one of those worries popping up again, talk to yourself, say, no, no, it's on paper. In the morning when I open my eyes, I can choose to pick up the paper and all of those worries can go back into my brain. But for right now, I don't need to think about them. They're on the piece of paper. Now, if you want to get a little bit more deep than that, again, like I like having nice notebooks, but you can have any notebook. You can journal in a way that's just free form, literally writing down what you're thinking. But what a lot of people, myself included, find really helpful are what's called journal prompts. And they can literally be, they're just questions that you're answering. So they can be things like, where do I see myself in 2 years' time? It can be, what am I most looking forward to doing when this level of restrictions is over? If I could go anywhere in the world that I wanted to go, where would I go? Where would I live? Ask these kind of questions. And what happens is you're tapping into creative parts of your brain. You are taking yourself away from where you are right now. So if where you are right now is in a very worried state, or you're anxious, or you can't even quite put your finger on it, but it just doesn't feel great, and you know it's preventing you from going to sleep, and your brain is worrying. What these things do is they just take you away from yourself. So picking up that piece of paper, picking up the notebook, taking time to write. Now, the other thing is when you think about it, it's one thing before you go to sleep. But sometimes when you wake up in the morning, do you find that the first thing you're going for is you're reaching for your phone, see what's on the news overnight, what's on journal.ie, what's on Facebook, what's on Twitter. Essentially what you're doing is just filling yourself back up with panic and with stats and numbers. So if we think about that glass ball with our sleep and we're protecting it, what you want to do, if you possibly can in the morning, is protect yourself from inputs from the outside world. So if you choose to not pick up your phone, or to not go onto these sites, or to not turn on and use radio, you get to choose the inputs that you put in. It's a great opportunity to start the day off again with breathing so that you're in a calm state. Pick up that journal again. Even the really easy question is, what would my best today look like? How would I like today to go? What would be the best thing that would happen to me today? Who am I looking forward to speaking to today? Anything that gets you away from the negative news and the fear, and that gets you looking forward to something that you're going to do today, or somebody that you're going to see, or even something that you're going to read. It's a great thing in the morning to have an inspirational book of some kind on the way, something that inspires you. It could be the life of somebody great. It could be just even those little books of quotes, ones that you find it almost feels like you're feeding your brain nice food because you're putting in quotes and inspirational things and things that make you feel happy. So as much as you can, make sure that before you go to sleep and when you wake up in the morning, that you're having opportunities to be in an altered state rather than the state that many of us fall into at the moment because we're being bombarded. We're being bombarded with a lot of negative news, and it's very, very natural to be fearful. So you want to alter your state at either end of the day by your breathing, by your journaling, by reading inspirational stuff, and sometimes just by picking up the phone and talking to somebody who makes you feel light and who makes you laugh. So to recap, we're going to think of our sleep as something precious, like a fragile glass sphere, and we're going to protect it. We're going to give it as much light as we possibly can, including outdoors in the morning, and we're going to protect it from light at the other end of the day. So no to the screens of any kind. We're also going to alter how we feel, how our brains are whirring and how our bodies are doing in terms of being in a stressed and anxious state. So we're going to do that by doing some easy breathing. We're going to check out some meditation apps. We're going to read inspiring stuff, and we're going to try our hand at journaling. So there's a chat function. You are so welcome to put in questions. I'll be absolutely delighted to answer them. And again, I'm Treasa from the Revolution Project. And thank you so much for spending your lunchtime with us today.